Well, we can get rolling as we let some final folks start to trickle in. So today we are, well, first off, welcome everybody. I am Matt Valm, CEO, co-founder of RevOps Co-op, community of, we are like right at almost 15,000 members. Like I checked this morning, 14,989. So I'm just going to say 15,000 to round up. 15,000 folks from all across the globe who are passionate about revenue operations. If you're not a member of the community already, I will throw our link into the chat. We got a free membership option, so plenty of ways to get involved. And through the community, we host a whole series of digital events and also in-person events, digital events like this, in-person events like our conference, which I'm going to give a quick plug for. You can see it on my background, but we host RevOps AF, which is an annual conference for the RevOps community. Next year, we're actually going to host two versions. One will be in New Orleans the first week of May. The other will be in Europe, in Berlin, in the middle of June. New Orleans, we're going to have 300 to 350 folks there. Berlin will probably have 100 to 150. We'll have after parties, offsite experiences, tons of great sessions so you can level up your RevOps game, make some new RevOps friends, meet with some old ones as well. I'll drop the link up for that in the chat as well. Tickets are available and on sale. Team discounts available too. But let's move away from the conference and to the topic for discussion today. We're going to be talking all about the CPQ problem and how to think about this problem, and specifically, as companies grow and scale, typically at pretty fast speeds, you often have to make some technology decisions early that maybe put out some immediate fires, but could potentially create some problems for you in the future. And so we're going to be talking about how to avoid this as much as you can, some frameworks, thought processes that you can put in place to, again, navigate this as you maybe go through this, have gone through this, we'll go through this again. And so to do that, I have a couple of CPQ and revenue technology experts with me. So I have Mark Lerner, who is a director of growth marketing over at Dealhub, which is one of the leading CPQ providers in the space. So he knows a thing or two about CPQ and the category. And then I've got Jeremy Steinbring, who is the founder of RevOnyx, one of the leading revenue operations consulting firms that is out there. And so having helped a bunch of clients navigate these pains or even having to unwind them himself, he's obviously seen a bunch here as well. So before I turn it over to you guys, I do have one non-RevOps, non-professional related question for you. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this in advance, so I'm truly putting you on the spot. But this is the same question I've asked at previous digital events that we've been hosting. So I want to see what your answers are here. And so Mark, I'm gonna go with
Oh
you
no.
first because I don't know, I feel like maybe giving Jeremy at least a little bit of time to prepare. So I mentioned our conference, right? You guys were there last year. I know you guys will be there again this next year in New Orleans. Imagine that you're at the RevOps AF event. You are a speaker, right? You've got
Sure.
350 people in the audience. We call your name because your session is about to happen. You're entering stage left. What is the walk-up song, the music that you would play as you enter the main stage and people are yelling and screaming, getting super jazzed for your talk?
I gotta go with Enter Sandman by the Metallica.
Oh, that's a good
Nice.
one.
Yeah. Just
Yep,
really set the stage, set the tone for the whole thing. Oh,
that's
I
great.
got somebody did a heart there. Awesome.
All
Appreciate that.
right. All right, Jeremy. So we've got, I don't know, we'll call it old school Metallica. Believe it or not, I've asked this question before, and someone actually was who's super into musicals said like
Hmm.
anything from The Sound of Music.
Okay.
You can take this any direction you want, but same question for you. You're speaking at the conference, you're entering the stage. What's your walk-up song?
You going with Bye Bye Birdie or something?
Honestly, to ask a musician this question is torture because like
Uh-huh.
how could you
You got to
possibly
just
choose
pick
one?
one.
So I'm gonna give you two. One, the instant song that came into my mind after watching the horrid fight last weekend was In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, just because it's
Okay.
like when I was thinking walk up song, I'm like, man, like it is a
So
good
now you're
song, but
just,
ironically, I
yeah.
would do that.
Is that an homage to Hangover?
No,
And Mr.
but
Tyson.
yeah, that's why
Yeah.
he did it. But it was just that's what's in my mind. Him in that
Yeah.
crappy car. He's so brutal to watch. Um, honestly, it probably would be Thunderstruck by
Nice.
AC/DC going with the same thing. It's just
I,
one of those.
That's a good one.
yeah. All right. I
Yeah.
like the genre. I like the genre that we're on. We've
Yeah.
got Metallica and AC/DC. I support both those efforts. All right. So let's do the very natural segue now from AC/DC and Metallica to CPQ, right? Just a
Yeah.
different acronym, if you will. So Mark, I know you've got some materials to pull up and can get
Yeah.
us started on the discussion. As you're doing that, I'll just remind folks in the audience, we do have the chat and the Q&A enabled. So as we're going through this, if you have questions for Mark or Jeremy, opinions, feedback, anything like that, drop them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll take your questions in real time. I'll make sure that we get to them. But yeah, Mark, go ahead, take us away.
Sure thing. Okay. Cool. So I am not going to bore everybody with slides on the screen the entire time. We're going to have them up, and then as Jeremy and I get into our tangents and conversations, we'll pull them down so you just see our heads. But the idea behind this was born from a conversation Jeremy and I had recently on a podcast, just chatting about kind of the current state of affairs in the CPQ space, in the quote to cash space, and RevOps more broadly. And there was so much like left on the table that I felt like it would have been it was worthwhile to have it be something more formalized. So that's where this idea of talking about the CPQ problem and all that comes from. So just to give you guys some background, Matt already introduced us, but my name is Mark Lerner. I'm the Director of Growth Marketing at Dealhub. Dealhub is a scalable, flexible quote-to-cash solution, configure price quote solution, native integrations with big ecosystems out there. Jeremy, you want to take a moment to...
Yeah, it's good to be here. I'm really excited about this topic. My name is Jeremy Steinbring. I'm the founder of RevOnyx, and our team does three things really well: CRM implementation, tech stack setup, and RevOps advisory. And we offer all of those under one roof, which is very rare in today's world.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, lay out the agenda here, we're going to try to stay on topic and not veer too far off the tracks here, but we're going to talk a little bit about market dynamics that's going on right now, defining that CPQ problem that we have in the title there that was vague, and we want to really break it down. Uncertainty and the legacy ecosystem that exists, how to look at building a revenue stack that can scale for the future, how to think about the build versus buy problem, and then it wouldn't be a conversation on the internet if we weren't at least going to spend a little time about AI. And so we'll talk about AI's place in RevOps currently and going forward. And then if there's time, we'll definitely open it up to conversation. So, to kick it off, I think when we talk about the market dynamics of kind of the CPQ quote to cash ecosystem, I've seen a few dynamics at play, and interested to hear, Jeremy, maybe your thoughts on it. There's some consolidation happening. There were some acquisitions. Cash flow as a CPQ. It was recently acquired by HubSpot. I believe Zilliant did an acquisition recently. So there's been consolidation and acquisition. Pricing has become more dynamic, especially as we all kind of deal with the ebbs and flows of the inflation environment. There's the focus away from growth at all costs, which was the mantra of all startups forever, and then it wasn't, to the sustainable growth, which is a very different way of thinking. There's obviously the introduction of AI and just generally rapid change. I'm going to take down this thing and maybe we can jam a little bit on the current state of affairs in the ecosystem and broadly in the space that you and I inhabit.
Yeah, there's two things that I see: one, rise in demand, and one, rise in confusion,
for sure,
which are definitely conflicting problems and conflicting stats. I think there's a big rise in demand, especially since the pandemic. I think that in order to make your product, your business's product, more attractive, we had to get more complex and customized. We had to add products. We had to change them and how they're connected or offered in a way that makes you more attractive and stand out from your competition, which obviously you have a rise in demand of CPQ platforms that can then implement the plan that you have, right? The more customized it is, the more complicated it is, the more complicated or robust of a system that you need in order to resolve those, to deliver on it. But at the same time, and I think about this in like the CRM space, like everyone loves HubSpot for its simplicity, but as you continue to add complexity, guess who you're turning into, right? You'll inevitably be the Salesforce on the block, and then someone will be banging down your door to take it, right? So it's a problem because it becomes more complicated even though there's a higher demand. And I think the changes with AI and in the pandemic and coming out of that has really accentuated the speed at which that's occurring and happening.
Yeah. I think that I've had the opportunity over the last year and change to, just like you and I had a conversation, to host a podcast. And so I've gotten to speak to revenue leaders, and it's basically ends up being the focus of the conversation is, okay, how did you survive the last bunch of years? Because it was such a whipsaw, right? Free money being bazookaed on the economy and everybody kind of doing well. And then the rug gets pulled out and a whole bunch of people just weren't able to adapt to that quickly enough. And I still think we're seeing the impact of that, especially in the tech space, right? There's this weird dynamic. I think many of the folks out there probably feel it, where it's like you read the news that hiring, the economy for jobs has never been stronger. But I think if you glance in our world at what people are going through who are looking for jobs, it's very much not that experience.
Yeah.
The pace of change, I think, has had this massive effect across everything, but had a, I think, particular effect in this very kind of narrow place because, among other things, when you deal with something so critical to your revenue stack, right? When this quote to cash process is like the crux of it, if it's rigid and it can't be adapted to a changing environment, if it takes 6 to 9 months to adapt your pricing or to change your products, by the time it rolls out, it's a different thing and you got to change it all over again. That's just not a sustainable way to work anymore.
Yep.
And so that's why I think it's just super interesting. And I think it takes us, unless you have something more to add on that, we can talk a little bit about the meat of the thing. Jeremy, was there anything else you wanted to add? Or Matt, did you want to jump in on anything about the current state of affairs?
The only other thing I was going to add is the rate of change is, like you mentioned, is super. It's honestly the problem is the speed of change and the accuracy at which you can implement change within your business on the products and pricing side. The thing that I see that everyone's super hyped up about is usage-based pricing, which I think is going to be the next complication as it relates to CPQ. Like, I see a world in which you have your proprietary product that your customers use. That information is automatically sent into the CPQ module, which then creates invoices and billing, and it's all automated. You don't need a human to intervene. And I think that's going to be the next wave, given a lot of AI platforms, a lot of AI companies are moving towards more of a usage-based model. I think that's going to be the next thing that we have to overcome.
So that's I guess that fast rate of change, like that's never going to change, right? So is that just like, how do we get used to that? Or how do we build things knowing that they're going to change rapidly? And the other thing that we go through is there's always this cycle of like bundling and debundling and like trends, right? And like you've heard it, like I remember growing up, my parents were like, oh, like that fashion was popular back in my day, right? And I'm seeing
Toe
the same
socks.
thing. Yeah. And like I'm seeing the same thing.
Cargo
I'm seeing the
pants.
same thing.
Apparently
That's
they're
right.
back.
Yeah, my wife always talks about high-waisted pant, like all this stuff. So it's all back. And so same thing, right? Remember like, SaaS technology, we go through this cycle of bundle everything together, right? Like one platform that can do it all. Then it's no, let's debundle, and you need point solutions that do one thing really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the same thing's going to happen with pricing, where it's like license based, right? Like pay per user per month. And then it's, oh no, let's not do that. Pay for what you use, right? Like usage-based, consumption-based pricing. And like eventually be like, no, don't do that. Like a platform fee. So you just know exactly what you're like, and we'll just go through this. So like,
Yeah.
how do we approach that, knowing that's the world that we live in and our careers are not going to be in just one of those cycles, right? Like they'll
Yeah.
span.
I agree. You articulated a thing that I probably haven't been able to articulate, but definitely feel. I think that the delta between, if you think of change as the waves, the distance between the waves it feels like it's getting shorter. I don't know if there's a way to actually quantify it. But it's true that we go through these phases where, the one that pops up in my head and which makes me a little bit skeptical of going all in on the idea that everyone's going to go usage based is that there was a time where every VC on earth told every company they worked with, you have to go PLG, even though no one even really fully understood what PLG meant, and companies restructured their entire sales process only to realize that PLG is just not a model that works for them. Yes, there are some very well-known ones that did very well, but a lot of them didn't, and it just wasn't the right move. I do think that the initial subscription model on a per seat basis was just due to a bug of not being able to charge for value, right? The technology didn't exist. The question is usage the value metric that'll be charged for? I think there was a really interesting blog post by Sequoia called something like service as a software. But essentially what they're saying is that in this new AI world, products will be priced based on outcomes rather than anything else. But so I think to your main question is you just have to be on your toes, and you have to build a world. You have to build an organization, a company, a technology stack, a management team that knows that change is a constant and is not going to get stuck. And everything is built to change. That's kind of how I approach it. What do you think, Jeremy?
Yeah. It hits home for me because as a consultant, even if we bill in hours and projects and retainers, you still have to show value. And I can tell you, as someone who does consulting in the RevOps world, how do you take RevOps and the impact that you're having with a client and put it into something tangible? It's incredibly difficult, and it's possible. And it takes a lot of time to build that trust and actually show all of the insights that you've provided and all the change that you've made. And it's an essential part of why we've grown and why we've been able to keep our customers, because we can properly share all of the things that we've done. But I think it comes down to pointing to tangible data, numbers, analytics, the before and after picture that has really helped us to do that. And this is why I think, again, I hate to talk about AI. I did not approve AI being a topic item for this call, just so everyone's aware.
Not true.
No, I did not do it. No, don't put words in my mouth. But I do think it's going to help us get insights much faster, looking at thousands and thousands of rows of data, which will help us prove value over usage. So I do think that's something that's coming. We're just, like most things with AI, we're just not there yet. We're just not there yet.
I think there's so much to be said here, but I want to make sure that we get to the meat of our discussion. I'm going to quickly pull up this slide and then we can put it down. But I think this concept, this idea of the Frankenstack, when you brought it up in our podcast conversation, stuck with me because I'd never heard it, but I immediately understood what it meant, why it was painful. There's so much just in that word that I fully get. And Matt brought it up a little bit in the beginning, where you make these choices early on. And most of those choices are to speed things up and reduce friction. But it's hard to make those choices early on and also take into account the impact of that later on. And it reminds me of, I don't know, anyone who's got kids or remembers childhood, a Dr. Seuss book where these kids are at home and they make a stain somewhere in the house, and then they keep trying to clean the stain up, but everything they do, the stain just moves somewhere else. It's this game of whack-a-mole. And so it's whatever decision you make here, you push here, over here somewhere, it's going to pop up and you're not going to realize it. I'd love to hear a little bit. And so that was one thing. And then just generally, there's this legacy ecosystem, tooling, and as legacy systems do, the flexibility, adaptability, ease of use are not core features or values. And so they are dinosaurs in so far as they just move very slowly. I don't know why dinosaur moves slowly. I guess more like a turtle, maybe. Just move very slowly to adapt. And I think that is to the detriment of their user base. But I think I kind of want, Jeremy, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about Frankenstacks, what that means, how you came up with the term, and how you've seen it over time.
Yeah, like anything, I take credit for nothing. I'm sure I heard it somewhere along the way. I can't remember, but this is how I think about it in my head. And it is the biggest reason I have a job. Just is what it is. It's the biggest reason. We tend to help our clients are, in my most of my experience has been startups, series A to D, under 300, 400 employees. That's kind of that area that I'm talking about. And it's the same movie played over and over and over again. And how it happens is we start off really small, right? So it might be a founder setting up a basic CRM or a VP of sales. You might have 30, 40 people and you're like, okay, let's get organized. The Google Sheet isn't working anymore. Let's adopt an easy to use CRM and do it ourselves to save a little bit of cash. So they do it themselves. And then they start hiring and identifying all of the tech stacks within each go-to-market team. All of a sudden, your marketing team starts having their own little tech stack. The sales team starts having their tech stack. The customer success team, the product, everybody. And then what happens is you start seeing some success. You maybe raise a round of funding, and it just exacerbates that you're moving too fast to go back and be like, wait. We should probably reevaluate all the things we've already evaluated. And and I've learned this a lot through owning my own company too. Every time your business doubles or triples, you need to rebuild your entire tech stack and processes because your business is just completely different. That does not happen in startup. What happens is we're additive. We're always adding tools. We're never consolidating tools. We're never going back and rebuilding processes. We're building on everything that we've already done already. And how this rears its ugly head is you guys end up calling me 5 years in saying, hey, we got 30 tools. They're all integrated. No one trusts them. Most of us are working out of Google Sheets and Excel. My board is asking me what our top of funnel looks like, and I can't provide any, and I have zero trust and can't provide any details to them. Jeremy, could you help me build a few dashboards? That's like how we start most of our conversations. And it's so far away from the absolute, like the core problem of the Frankenstack is just that we didn't have the right guidance up front to build something that could grow with us because we were trying to save money, and it ends up costing you time and dollars like tenfold going down. So I'm sure like if anyone here has been on LinkedIn, you've heard consultants talk about this all the time, right? Like have it be set up right now so that you don't have to rebuild it 5, 6, 7 times over. Especially early on, it is so important. And at the rate of change, I guarantee you people on this phone call have had an issue and they've like, isn't there an AI tool or a tool that I could get? Ooh, it has AI in it. Let's buy that. I'm sure that will help. And this is why I have a love-hate relationship with AI, because we're just at this point, we're just throwing tools against the wall most of the time. And the outcome of that is incredibly low adoption. Your employees have no idea how your systems work. They don't fully understand. And how long does it take them to understand? And how long does it take them away from all the revenue generating activities that they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis? It costs a fortune. Data integrity goes out the window because you have 30 tools that are all integrated. They're all individually owned by their own siloed departments. So we notice a lot of overlap in systems that maybe marketing team uses and the CS team uses. They're paying for tools that do the exact same thing, and the business is paying for all of it. And so this is exactly the problem that we solve for our customers and is the reason I have a job. And it's unfortunate. And this is actually the impetus for why I started, because I was so sick of being the poor business systems or Salesforce admin at a company and trying to explain this to companies that had already, the toothpaste was out of the tube. They'd already gotten beyond this part in their journey. And I wanted to fix it for those who were in the middle of it.
Yeah, I always tell people to start with the problem, not the solution. So what you just mentioned, Jeremy, of people immediately going to, hey, there's got to be like an AI tool or some sort of software product that can help me solve this. That's the backwards way to look at it, right? Is like start with the problem. And a lot of times when I'm faced with, or I've been faced with people asking for new technology or new tools or new things, I always ask them that question of like, before I know what this product even does, can you just tell me what problem you're trying to solve with it? And a lot of times they haven't even thought through that. And so that's a good way to tease that out. But the other aspect of this is when you do identify a problem, especially one that you might have today, and someone told me this several years ago, and it's always just stuck with me, is like any problems that you have today will only get worse as you grow and scale. So
Hmm.
you just think about that for 1 second. That means that anything that you're experiencing today is not going to magically go away as you get bigger. It will just become more painful. So the question is not, will this problem exist for me to solve? The question is, when do you want to solve that problem? Like, how bad do you want the pain to be before you solve it? You're naturally not going to be able to solve all of these problems all at once, right? You got to prioritize and figure out how to attack this. But just keep that in mind of as you grow and get bigger, these things aren't going to magically go away. And there is one question that we had pop up for you guys because we were talking a little bit about CPQ, the Frankenstack, how these things can get bolted on to one another. Before this, we were talking about some of the differences between pricing models or go-to-market motions of usage versus subscription versus kind of transaction-based quoting. The question was around all of those differences, and as you're going through the CPQ evaluation process, outside of differences and capabilities between those different pricing models and like the product catalog, how much consideration should you give to um, this person phrased it as major IT partner centers that are out there? So if you're reselling Microsoft or Oracle services licenses or HP Cisco hardware, how should like can today's CPQ solutions easily tap into those kind of partner catalogs? So how should folks be thinking about that?
I feel like Jeremy, this is right up your alley, no?
You lost me a little bit around the Microsoft hardware stuff. I'm going to have to read the question to make sure that I get it right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mark.
If the question is around integrating with a partner relationship management solution, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
I think
obviously,
so. And being able to incorporate other, like if you're reselling products,
yeah,
if you're using a CPQ solution today and part of what you're doing is reselling and you need to integrate into other people's product catalogs in order to do that, how does that fit into the overall evaluation process? And maybe differences too, and like how you think about different providers and technology and building technology stacks in that space.
tough question. I could
Yeah.
give a very biased opinion just based on
The
what
company you work for. Yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
company I work for, which I'm happy to say does this and does integrate into a partner relationship management kind of ecosystem. And we have customers that are on both sides of that arrangement. So they're the kind of the bigger player in the partnership and the reseller in the partnership. And it's, if that's your core business, it should be your core
Yeah. Requirement of
requirement. It's
any
just,
product that you have. Yeah.
so that's, I guess that's as much insight as I can give.
Jeremy, anything to add? Otherwise, Mark, you can keep rolling through the.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Honestly, I think it's very, I hate to give the consulting answer too,
it
but like
depends.
it really freaking does depend. It's really hard for me to someone's going to take this snippet of me giving my biased answer and then put it on the web. See, this guy thinks every time you should do this one thing. But I honestly, I really do think it depends on the situation and requirements. What I will tell you is usually CPQ modules, whether it's Dealhub, Salesforce CPQ, whichever product it is, normally the issue is not flexibility in the technology. That's normally not the problem. I mean, you can solve for a lot of different use cases, especially the ones that have been around a long time. They've seen just about every pricing model and every sales process that you need to support. So usually it's not the technology, it's whether or not you configure it a certain way, which will depend a lot on the business itself.
Yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit on a few of the things that were said specific to this, and then we can continue the conversation. But I think this is super critical. At DealHub, we deal with companies usually starting around mid-market and up, however you define that. To go into details, but it's always very impressive to me how far some very well-known companies go with a Google sheet and some macros, be especially the ones that are in hyper growth mode. I'm thinking of one in particular, I'm not going to name names, but just one of the fastest growing kind of startups out there. When they had a system basically using Google Sheets to try to manage approvals and price books and all these things. And when it starts, they're like, okay, this is a shortcut to a bunch of stuff that we would have to worry about later. But eventually, 3 years later, they have like over 1,000 employees. What do you do? Because if you come to that realization and you have 1,000 employees and you need to move quickly. And then you come up against an ecosystem, an environment, a technology environment in which let's say, call them legacy solutions in the space, you may need to put aside 6, 9+ months for an implementation. You don't have 6 or 9 months. And especially today, I don't think anyone has 6 or 9 months. And so it's something just I continually observe. But I don't know, Jeremy, if you have an example of kind of the most impressive Frankenstack out there.
I can tell you a couple stories about clients or businesses that I've helped through this problem. And I talked about how early on, a lot of times you're trying to do it yourself. And listen, I love-hate relationship with a lot of these tools. AI, CPQ, they serve great purposes. When configured and implemented properly, they can really make a difference and move the needle. So I'm definitely not suggesting that they're all bad and painful. However, I have never met a person that's, yay, it's time to implement a CPQ. I'm so stoked about this. The implementation's going to be great. I cannot wait to pay for this product. That's never the conversation I'm having. It's usually doing everything in your power to avoid having to do it. And specifically for us, most of the customers and most of the businesses I've worked for have been in the tech and SaaS space. And so they have subscription-based products that are needed. And if you have a HubSpot or a Salesforce instance with no subscription management tool and you're selling subscriptions, you almost instantaneously have a big problem on your hands. And it's only a matter of time before you need a full-fledged CPQ solution. And I tell customers this all the time. Couple specific instances where it got very bad. I worked for a company several years ago. I was brought in as like a systems architect internally to manage their Salesforce instance, a handful of things. And they said, hey, your first order of business is to try to figure out how we're managing our subscriptions. What are our renewal dates? When do products renew? When do they start? We're having some issues, not only like revenue recognition, understanding what's coming up for renewal, understanding our pipeline, reaching out to customers ahead of time, all the basic stuff that you've talked about and that we know about. We ended up having to rip and replace Salesforce because for 7 years that the company had been around, they had hired 3 or 4 Salesforce admins and business systems people that built everything themselves with formulas, flows, and there was no documentation like most. I mean, that's probably an assumed thing. There was no transfer of knowledge. There was one CFO who kind of knew everything and knew how to pull things out of Salesforce and manipulate it in a spreadsheet in order to get what he wants. And the pain of having to do the oil change on the car at the same time that you're driving at 60 mile an hour down the highway was so great and so distracting that the actual best solution was to start over.
Yeah.
And just think about that. Like the decision to not just invest in a CPQ tool at whatever that inflection point was, it might have been 2 years in, 3 years in, whatever that point was, rather than saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to invest the dollars necessary to implement something like this. I'm going to keep building off of what we've done thus far. And I got to a point where we had to rip out the heart of your tech stack, which is your CRM, and start over. It costs a fortune. We had to bring in third-party consultants because, of course, I was on a team of 1 at the time. As most startups, they don't have a team of 50 RevOps and solutions partners. It was incredibly painful. And I think the last admin knew that it was so painful because they were adding a new product line item. They were adding a new product line to their business, and around October, September, October, he quit because everything that he built couldn't fix he knew it. And so I was brought in 3 months before the new product release happened, and we had to start a rebuild. And so the impacts of this specific problem, we can say this about your sales engagement tools and AI, those a lot of times are plug and play. You can rip those out when you want. But when we're talking about something as foundational as how you're managing your subscriptions, if you're a SaaS company and your CRM, you're turning everybody up. You're turning the whole business upside down. All progress stops. And it's incredibly painful. And that's why very early on in conversations I have with customers, if they sell a subscription-based product, I tell them your CRM is not set up to support that.
Sure.
And so we need to decide between the pain of not having a tool manage it for us and paying for it is really what we have to do. And a lot of times we come to an agreement that, okay, for right now, we need to build XYZ to get at least this like MVP out of Salesforce, but next year we are planning to implement a new solution because we're guiding them through making that choice. But I've definitely seen the other way around. It's brutal.
Cool.
Yeah, and I just have two examples I want to share. One's on each side of the spectrum for this topic of the Frankenstack. So one is actually several years ago when I joined a company on the sales team, and this company had raised hundreds of millions of dollars. From the outside looking in, everything was great. And then I got there and started to look at Salesforce, and I was like,
oh boy,
there was like nothing there. I was like, there were like deals weren't in there. I was talking with the VP of sales. He was like, "Oh yeah, we should spend some time getting some of these opportunities created." I was like, "Okay, that's weird." And then he was like, "Oh yeah, we should probably like start to meet on a regular basis to review the pipeline too." I was like, "Okay, that's also weird." And then I looked around and there was we had an on-staff dedicated Salesforce administrator. I was like, "What's this guy doing all day?" We had a VP of commercial operations. I'm like, what are they doing all day that none of this stuff is in place? So needless to say, there was a lot of stuff, a lot of money being spent there on things that just absolutely were not needed. And then the flip side, this was like 2 or 3 years ago, this was just through the community, but I came across a 600 person company that had a custom Airtable as their CRM. Like it works both ways. Like on one hand, was like investing in all this really expensive stuff and absolutely did not need it right now. On the other hand, had Airtable as their CRM and somehow managed to get to 600 employees and a successful business. But to what you mentioned before, Jeremy, about the rip and replace, it's like they clearly had a problem. It got more painful as they grew and scaled. And because they chose not to address the pain early on, they had to address it later on with a more expensive rip and replace, probably more painful solution than they otherwise would have. So again, your problems will not go away, right? They will just get more painful.
Yeah, I want to take it back to where we're going. I think we talked about Frankenstacks, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about what CPQ is, what it was originally meant for, and how it feels a little bit like the original idea of it is taking a square peg, smushing it into a round hole, right? So the legacy ecosystem, and when I say legacy, the players that have been in the space for decades, all were basically a result of acquisitions many years ago, right? So Big Machines was bought by Oracle, SAP bought Calidus Cloud, Steelbrick was bought by Salesforce, and Aptus was bought by Conga. And the concept of CPQ was really originally, and this was an interesting realization when I learned it, meant for manufacturing, where you have all these SKUs, all these tiny little widgets with a huge amount of complexity, but limited amount of automation in the price quoting process. And so there was a need there. The needs of people, especially probably many folks on this call right now, when it comes to quote to cash, are probably quite different than that of manufacturing companies from 20 years ago. And I think, to me, that speaks a lot to some of the challenges that people have. I think you bring up CPQ implementation with someone and you'll see kind of post-traumatic stress disorder come over them in a lot of ways. They usually have a very negative experience with that, but I would love to jam on that idea a little bit and how some of these older systems really were built for a very different problem set than what we're putting on them today.
I think the big thing that you touched on, honestly, is why is it so painful?
Yeah.
And I see a couple different things, a couple different trends when we have this conversation. One, how do you get your current tech stack to be ready for a CPQ implementation? And what I mean this in kind of two ways. One, the technology. So what have you done in your Salesforce or HubSpot instance or CRM? Are you using an Airtable, a custom built Airtable as your CRM? is it possible to successfully implement the technology? That's what's one part of the problem, and typically the part of the problem that our team really owns and takes care of. The other part of the problem is whether your product or business is ready for it. And I feel like most of the time, whether we're talking Salesforce CPQ implementation, a CRM implementation of any kind, the issue is usually the business has underlying problems and they're not ready for it. The expectations of what it's going to do when you're done and it's over with, we're not quite sure. We don't have set goals. Matt, to your point about knowing exactly what our goal is before we invest in a system. And we might not even have rules in place. If we're talking about setting up approval processes for discount tiers, what happens if you don't have clear discount tiers? Everyone's discounting everything. There's no management of it. If you don't have that process in place and then you just try to slap technology on it, that becomes a problem. I think the other thing too is, and as humans, I feel like we fall into this shiny object syndrome trap with just about every system. Just because we can do something really doesn't mean that we should. And obviously the reason things become Frankenstacks and the reason we have so much turmoil when it comes to CPQ implementation is because it can do a lot and we decide to move forward with all the bells and whistles. And then we realize when we need to change course, it's harder to unimplement things that we've set up. And then you're in the spot where there's too many, that we've gone too far. Like we've over-engineered, we've complicated, we left our employees behind. They don't understand these systems. And now, so I see more of those problems than the actual technology itself. There's more like human people process issues that I see that cause these implementations to go sideways.
And one question for both of you, actually. So there's a question in the audience, and then I'm going to add something onto this and try to, like, at the end, if you can summarize this in the simplest, most concise way. But for folks who may not have a CPQ in place today, what is the inflection point to tell them that it is something they should start to evaluate? So that's question number one. And then the second question is for folks who may have an existing CPQ in place today, is there an inflection point that might tell them that they should evaluate alternatives or rethink how they're leveraging their current solution today? So Jeremy or Mark, I don't know who wants to go first, but
I slapped this thing together and hopefully we can make sense of it. Just understanding the different personas within an organization at different stages of growth, and when we Dealhub usually see relevance for a CPQ, it's really as you begin automating things, as you have like reliable data that can be automated in some way and become scalable, is when you should at least start thinking about it. It's when the pain of some of these Frankenstacks really become a challenge. When startup phase, you're in survival mode. You're just trying to figure it out. It doesn't matter. Like you just need to get to that first million or whatever it is. As you scale into the SMB range, you're starting to get basic repeatable processes in place. That becomes the strategic shift. And somewhere between the SMB and mid-market world is when we see this moving from having the basic processes in place to beginning to automate those processes. That's generally where we see the inflection point begin from our perspective. To the second question, that's a huge one. I think there's a lot of things that go into that. If it's not working for you and you feel like you've bashed your head against the wall one too many times, maybe it's time to make a change. But yeah, Jeremy, I don't know if you want me to leave this up or if you have thoughts.
Yeah, listen, I'm incredibly biased with the answer that I'm going to give.
Yeah.
If it were me, I would much rather have a solid tech stack that is scalable and flexible than an extra 5 people on my team. And the way that we are going, which is, and when I say going, I mean like the trend, you're going to see startups with a lot less people and a lot more systems. You're going to have agents AI agents. You're going to have automated processes and automations between these tools. And honestly, it's cheaper and more effective to have systems do things instead of humans.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. And so for me, if you're selling subscription-based products, I would almost out of the gate, and again, I told you this is kind of a hot take, almost out of the gate, you need a CPQ. If it was me, knowing what I know now and knowing what I've seen and seeing hundreds of customers and their journey through this process and the pain of having to rip and replace or implement after it's too late. It's if you just implement the right systems, the most efficient it can be, and then subsidize those systems with people, now I can have a seller who just sells.
Yeah.
Who does what I need them to do. If your team is spending, if you take the average AE, let's just assume for this example that the AE is taking a customer through the vast majority of the sales cycle and they're processing in a tool like Dealhub or Salesforce CPQ. If more than 20 to 25% of their time is being taken up by administrative quote creation, manually having a quote and then creating an envelope in DocuSign and then doing red lines back and forth in Word and then manually updating the contract back onto the opportunity, doing random math. Your CFO comes to you or your finance team comes to you and say, hey, these numbers don't quite line up and they're working out of a spreadsheet. It's already probably time. It probably was time a year before you start feeling that pain. So I would much rather buy the tech stack that you need that's going to support you over the next at least year or two in the current state that has the flexibility to change, and then never worry about it again. As long as you have those systems that are in play, and I would much rather have a more robust but smaller amount of tech stack tools, right? So I would invest in a Salesforce, I would invest in a Dealhub or CPQ, I would invest in the core tools and have less of them rather than having little tiny issues and having 50 systems that all integrate. It makes for a mess later on.
Yeah. But I want to put out there maybe what is the revenue stack of the future, right? So you were talking about maybe less tools that are more robust. We talked a little bit about this. We were in this point solution world. We're now in a phase of consolidated tech stacks. What are the core things? You mentioned a few of them, but that need to be in place to make something scalable in this upcoming continued shift that we're going through.
Yeah. For me, and again, this is a biased answer. This is if I had a SaaS company and I was trying to make these changes, and assuming affordability is a big part of this too. Because especially earlier, smaller companies, if you have to pick and choose. If we had all the money in the world, sure, great. It's really easy to make some of these decisions, but it's not as simple as, oh yeah, this is the more robust tool, I'll just go buy that. There's a lot more that goes into it. However, being that I am an expert in these systems and knowing how to utilize them properly, which is also a big something to consider when you're making these decisions, as well as the maintenance and do we have the expertise to actually manage this ourselves? I would have obviously a HubSpot or a Salesforce at the core. There are certain tools like a CPQ module. Obviously, they have CLM, the contract management cycle, that the whole sending contracts back and forth between customers and then connecting it to an opportunity or a deal and then making sure I could properly track renewals. That is table stakes for me. Also analytics tools, things that I could put on top of that core set of data to get me insights. My preference, I really like a tool like DataBox just because it's easy to use. It's visually pleasing. You can use it for board meetings and employee meetings, but then still get some really deep, solid information out of it. I also really like lean data. Again, the tech nerd that I am, consolidating duplicates, lead to account matching. Man, there's a lot of tools that I would implement if I could. But at a minimum, again, if you're selling SaaS, we're talking about CPQ today. If you're selling SaaS, you are probably, and you're asking the question, is it time to implement a CPQ? It's probably time because you're feeling the pain enough to ask yourself that question. That's what I would say.
Yeah. And I think that from the way I see things, there's a few core things that you need to be able to do in order to scale and handle all these changes we talk about. The first being able to manage and access an organized product listings, an advanced product catalog, be able to customize pricing configurations based on specific customer criteria like volumes, types, being able to automate, if you're talking about a subscription model, automate the kind of renewals and recurring payments, that process, or else it's just completely unscalable if that's your pricing model and that's not something that you can automate. Some sort of core rules engine around pricing and configuration that enables rules that are consistent across sellers with guardrails in place, and also having something that enables flexibility and dynamic price adjustments to meet the market demands like we talked about. Those are the core things that I see. It's specifically with a CPQ. And then look at the lift of implementation. I had a conversation at actually a RevOps Co-op event in New York the other day or the other week. Was talking to someone and brought up CPQ, and he said they were in year 2 of an implementation of a CPQ solution of a very well-known legacy player. And my mouth was agape, though I shouldn't be surprised by that at this point. And it's not that uncommon. I would say, as a final point, very uncommon in Dealhub. That doesn't happen, but it is uncommon. It's quite common, and for a variety of reasons, but it really needs to be, you can't wait 2 years to make that change.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Leave it
Actually,
at that.
that's probably the answer to my other question of when you should be evaluating other CPQs.
If you're in year 2 of an
if you have to
implementation, it's time to
measure
change.
implementation in terms of years, then you should probably be looking elsewhere. So
The ultimate sunk cost fallacy, if I've ever heard one. Yeah.
Yep. Mark and Jeremy, thank you guys very much for joining and dropping some knowledge on the crew today. To everyone in the audience, thank you for attending. When you sign off, you'll be prompted to fill out a quick 2-question survey providing some feedback on the event today. If you can please complete that and let us know how we did. We take all of our feedback very seriously so that we can improve.
And personally, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Mark lost all of his hair.
Exactly.
But that's all I got for you guys. So Jeremy, Mark, and everyone out there, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. I'll see you all on the flip side. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later.
Bye.